now rocking with the best. Who's the boxing show that's knocking out the competition? The kick-ass podcast that make you want to listen. The place where boxing fans and fighters rejoice. Thumbs up for Richie, you're listening to the fighter's voice.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Richard Ortiz of the Fighter's Voice, the only voice that matters. I'm like our guest today. We're simply knocking out the competition. Today, we're going to talk about Triple G and Canelo the third time around. They're going to make it happen once again. And we're also going to talk about possibly breaking the top 10 in the next fight or so, or maybe this fight, and we're talking about a new star being born, and that's Bam Rodriguez. And also the retirement of Mikey Garcia. And, of course, we're going to break down the 140-pound division, Josh Taylor. What's his next move? And what top prospects, contenders are going to step up and fight for that strap? And we can't have a show without talking about Jake Paul. And you know what? Hey, let's talk about Mayweather today. I mean, let's just bring somebody up and just go with the flow. You know what? I need a whole episode. I mean, when I start talking about our guest, about his resume, and we're talking about on-air ringside reporter for Ring City USA, NBC Sports, ESPN, Fox Sports, DAZN Boxing, four-time Emmy-nominated former HBO producer, host of his own podcast. I believe it's ATE. He'll tell us what it stands for. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Mr. Curran Bhatia. Welcome to the Fighter's Voice, my man.
Hey, how are you doing? Thank you so much for having me, Richie, and thank you for that intro. ATE, Ask the Experts. That's the name of the podcast.
All right.
If you want to find it wherever you can find your podcast, and thank you for mentioning my background. Been in this world for a long time. Looking forward to talking some boxing with you, and yeah, feel free, bring it on, wherever the conversation takes us.
You know, let's talk about the new star of boxing. I mean, a new star to the whole world. But according to Robert Garcia, when he met Bam Rodriguez and his brother Joshua Franco, I believe at the tender age of, I want to say 8 and 11. I'm not too sure exactly what it was. It feels good to inherit a top prospect and then he becomes champion. But when he's homegrown, all the way from the amateurs, all the way up, I mean, it has to be something special. And you can see Robert's expression on how proud he is in both Joshua Franco and Bam Rodriguez. Let's talk about Bam Rodriguez. What was your whole take on the outcome? And did you think he was going to be able to stop, this veteran of the boxing world?
Yeah, absolutely. Bam Rodriguez, only 22 years old, obviously already a force in the division. He seems to have it all. We saw him take out Cuadras, who's an experienced veteran. We've seen Carlos Cuadras in there with a lot of people in the division. He took him out. And then in spectacular fashion, he took out Srikaset Sorangvisai. It was a knockout win. It was absolutely spectacular. It seemed like Sorangvisai didn't have a plan B of any kind to take out Bam. Like I said, only 22 years old. He's moving up in divisions, so he has some flexibility. He could move down. He could move up. Seems like sky's the limit for the kid. So I think very much exciting things ahead for Bam Rodriguez.
You know what? He was supposed to get a title shot on the undercard of Mikey Garcia's last fight in Fresno, California, but that fell through. Leading up to that, he was, I don't want to say on a shelf, but he was very patient after his brother Joshua Franco won the bout. He knew his time would come, and he was almost forgotten. But, those who wait, big things head your way, especially when you take every opportunity that comes your way. We're talking about moving up 2 weight classes and taking that title shot.
Yeah, I think, when I hear those who wait, right, I think as boxing fans, the alarms go off because we think of fights over-marinating and then never happening or happening way too late. Of course, Mayweather-Pacquiao happening way too late. So many fights that we wanted never did happen or way past their expiration date, like Amir Khan versus Kell Brook and so many others.
Yeah, there you go.
But to your point, at the same time, this kid's only 22 years old. He's got the world at his feet, so he can kind of, this early in his career, it's okay to wait for the right opportunity. We like to see our young fighters active. We like to see them, kind of piling up wins. And if they can't get a big name opponent, you want them in a stay busy fight. But especially now with the opponents that he has taken out recently, He's obviously a shooting star, and this career has worked out nicely. It's almost a juxtaposition to another fighter that I know we're going to be talking about later, in Mikey Garcia, in terms of when waiting is a good thing or a bad thing. In Mikey's case, it maybe wasn't the best thing, but for Bam, it's working out.
It is. It really is. And his brother Joshua Franco, and these boys have been patient. They always knew they had what it would take to become a world champion. It's just getting that opportunity, and a lot of times they don't get the opportunity. And talking to Robert off camera, he mentioned me. He said, Richard, nobody wanted to sign him. Nobody wanted to give him an opportunity. There was too many strings attached, and in order for him to get a deal. He got one the very next day. I mean, after he showed the world. Eddie Hearn's no fool. He knows what he has. He knows what's in front of him, and he knows, he looked at Texas, and you know what? Fighting at home, I mean, it was like a pay-per-view style.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, that's the business of boxing, right? And everyone has these prospects, but it's about shining when the lights are the brightest, and stepping up to the plate, daring to be great, and rising up to those opportunities. And when a young kid does that, I mean, it just makes us as boxing fans so excited at the potential there, that someone, we've seen fighters who were supposed to be, let's just say, the next big thing. Came to my mind, for example, was like a Victor Ortiz, not to pick on Victor Ortiz, but, people expected
I like
a
Victor.
lot from
Poor
Victor.
Victor. I like Victor.
Yeah, and Victor, we all like him personally, and he's, obviously always had a huge smile on his face. But the reason I bring up that comparison, it's the first thing I thought of in terms of the expectations on his shoulders. At one point, he was supposed to be like the next Golden Boy, the next Oscar De La Hoya. He had power in both hands. He was bilingual. He had it all. And then Marcos Maidana happened, right? And so then, and then there was a series of when the lights were the brightest, the fighter didn't perform at their best, and there's been many others. And like I said, I don't mean at all to pick on Victor. It's just the name that came to mind. Point being, for our fighters that dare to be great, we obviously love when they actually shine, when the lights are the brightest. And when the lights were the brightest for Bam Rodriguez, I mean, he absolutely shined.
Talking to Bam Rodriguez, he's not shy of letting you know that he is who he says he is. Before he was a world champion, he said, Richard, it's hard to have a fight, get a big opportunity when you're that good. Meaning he accepted it, he embraced it. That's really not his style. He's very humble, but he had no choice but to embrace it and store the confidence that he already had in himself, just being patient, waiting for that opportunity.
Well, you know what? I think it is for a lot of these fighters, they grow up in the gym. They see fighters older than them getting the opportunities. Yes. They work with trainers that also work with maybe world champions or contenders or prospects and things like that. So they get to kind of take it all in. And what that leads to is an opportunity to visualize, right? You visualize yourself walking through the ring, being the main event on a big platform. You visualize yourself knocking out a former world champion and the lights shining bright and the fans cheering your name. So it allows them to kind of think about what it would be like for them. And that's what happened for Bam Rodriguez. He's been in the game for a while, only 22 years old. So sky's the limit. There's a lot of really good youth in boxing right now and a lot of fighters to be excited about.
Exactly. And we're going to move on right now, but I want to talk about when he shows up at Robert Garcia's Boxing Academy. You have the likes of Mikey Garcia, Jose Ramirez, Virgil Ortiz. I mean, the list goes on, and sometimes Robert gets some side projects and work with already world champions, MMA fighters, and he becomes contagious. I mean, you're no longer the best one or the strongest one inside of that gym. And I think that's what every fighter wants, to be challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent some time at the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy. It's like dorm style living. There's like a house that the fighters are all living
There's
there.
Horses and stuff in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're all challenging each other. There was a giant workout with all of these fighters that we've heard of, and some of the names that you mentioned there. Virgil Ortiz was there. There was so many others. The Riverside Rocky was there. There was a lot of fighters that we heard of, and they're all kind of training together, competing with each other. And yeah, on one hand, you see a guy that it's not necessarily competition. He's your stablemate, but let's say he's doing this in training. You may want to up that, right? It's just the nature of competition. And obviously these fighters, they're young, they're hungry, they're competitive. So definitely a good environment to be in, especially if you were somewhere like that where you're away from the outside distractions and you have people to keep you accountable, right? When the alarm goes off in the morning for the next guy, he's getting up to go do his road work. Are you going to stay in bed? Well, if you were alone somewhere or in your own private apartment, you might just hit that snooze button. But if you see the guy next to you or in the room next to you getting up to go, you may get up to go too. It might motivate you. And I'm sure that's the case in the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy.
Hey, man, you know that old saying, iron sharpens iron.
Yes, absolutely. I think someone said that about this pod that we were on, so I appreciate that. I believe that was Rick V, so shout out to him.
Oh yeah, yeah, my man. I mean, he has a lot of love for the sport. Very very hungry for the sport, and he's one of the good guys. When I say one of the good guys, because we know what's out there. We know the deck of cards that's out there. You name it, they're out there. But yeah, my man, he's one of the good guys. I enjoy.
Yes, shout out to our man. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about Mikey Garcia, but before we do that, I want to jump right into the 140-pound division. And there's a lot of questions to be answered because what is Josh Taylor really going to do? I mean, I'm hearing he wants to stay down for the rematch to prove everybody wrong, the whole media, that the day of, that was just a shell of himself, that he left everything inside of the ring in Las Vegas when he fought Jose Ramirez. But if he does vacate, we're going to try something different, Curran Bhatia. We're going to put all these fighters in the mix because we're talking about Jose Ramirez, the Regis Prograis, Arnold Barboza, Teofimo Lopez, Jose Cepeda. And if I'm missing one, I mean, we can mix them in there. You know what we get, the American public? If Josh Taylor vacates, we get one heck of a tournament in the 140-pound division. I mean, number one fighting number two for the WBO, for the IBF, for the WBA, and the WBC. We just get to sit back, and if there's no politics involved, watch some good boxing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when a fighter becomes undisputed and has all the belts, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, what happens if that fighter moves up in weight or down in weight or whatever it is, or vacates or can't make a deal on a certain belt? So there's a lot of interesting things that come with the whole undisputed title. It's something that probably most fighters want, but there's a lot of different entities at work, if you will, right? If you think
Right.
about the different governing bodies who all have their own separate rankings, and they're mandatory. One mandatory for one belt may not be the same mandatory as the other belt, and you may have a time limit, or you may need to pay someone step aside money. So there's a lot of complications that come into place. 140, it's obviously a great division. I think a lot of people wouldn't mind seeing the Ramirez rematch. That was a great fight. Again, Josh Taylor's last fight when he came out, he probably wasn't his best performance, so to speak. Scorecards were close. I remember tweeting after the fight, I was like, should he have won that fight? I wasn't saying yes or no. I was just kind of curious as to what people think. And then I think you mentioned some of the players in the division. I think the most interesting for me personally, Teofimo Lopez moving up to 140 pounds. I find that absolutely fascinating for many reasons. I mean, if you look at Teofimo, young, hungry, was hungry, right? It seemed like maybe in his last fight things weren't fully there. Didn't come together in the ring, and it'll be really, really interesting to see how he makes
no
an
plan B
after taking that loss. No plan B. Well, the plan B I think came together late in that fight. I believe it was the 10th round when he knocked down Kambosos. I was there ringside. It was an amazing fight, and I think when Kambosos knocked down Teofimo in that round one. Obviously, Teofimo from Brooklyn. This fight was in New York. It just was pin drop silent. I mean, I think it was just an amazing punch by Kambosos, and it really, quieted the crowd. It changed the energy. Teofimo did come back, but didn't do enough to win that fight. But the question is, what is he going to do to make changes? Is it just moving up in weight, or are you going to train differently? Are you going to bring in more help? What's the plan for you? But I think there's a lot left for Teofimo Lopez. I think there's a very bright future ahead. I think, I think if he can stay focused and stay motivated and have the right team around him, I think a lot of special things can happen for him.
I agree with you. I think we have not seen the best Teofimo Lopez, and I think we will start to see that as he moves up to 140 and possibly even 147 in the future. Like you said, he's very young, has two bowling balls for shoulders where all the power is created, and he doesn't shy away from a challenge. There was a possibility of maybe him and Jose Ramirez. I know Arnold Barboza called him out. He has options. As long as they're calling him out, I mean, his name is continues to be relevant, strap or no strap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about boxing nowadays. I mean, obviously having a belt is important, but we know there's at least 4 major belts. Within those, there's super champions sometimes and interim champions and emeritus champions. So that adds to it. Then there's, the North American Continental Champion, right? And on and on and on. So there's obviously being a champion, I think it's still a great goal. And I think if you win a belt, you are champion of the world. And obviously fighters have dreams to do that. And we don't want to take that away in any way. But since there are 4 different champions per division, right, it definitely lessens it when there are, so many people that are champion in a division. What's really really important in boxing right now is marketing yourself, right? You need to connect with fans. You don't want to be the fighter that everyone wants to avoid and no one can get that fight with you. Demetrius Andrade is getting that treatment right now, right? A lot of big fighters are avoiding him. So you need to get to a place where you can market yourself and make yourself an attraction, make yourself a star. Teofimo 1000% is an attraction and a star. He's must-see TV. If he's not knocking you out, then something crazy like the Kambosos fight is going to be happening and all the buildup that went into that. So he is absolutely must-see TV, and he is absolutely a star. So there's no question that there's going to be a long list of names that want to fight him for that opportunity. And that goes into even the fact of people in boxing from other walks of life. I know we're going to talk about Jake Paul later, and that's a testament to Jake Paul in terms of the marketing aspect.
Absolutely.
Right? Making yourself an attraction, must watch. It's almost what Mayweather did for many years, right? Obviously, Mayweather is one of the most skilled technical boxers of our time, one of the best defensive boxers of all time, if not the best of our era for sure, right? But when he got later on in his career and he moved up in weight, he got more technical in his style. It was, someone compared it once to like a fighter who, like let's say Manny Pacquiao in his prime, or whoever getting knockouts is like a home run hitter. Mayweather in his prime is like a pitcher throwing a perfect game. It's really pleasing to someone who really appreciates and loves the game, but it doesn't have that, like, that spectacular knockout, right? Or that spectacular home run that a home run hitter would have. And Mayweather reinvented himself as that type of fighter, but then he balanced it out with the personality and the marketing, and a show I worked on for a long time, because HBO 24/7 showed off that personality and helped build up that story. And so people tuned in to either see him, fight if they like technical boxing, or to see him lose.
Curran, they tuned in to see Miss Jackson. Remember Miss Jackson on 24/7? That's why they tuned in.
Of course. No, I mean, that's part of what I'm saying here is about marketing yourself. And, I think what 24/7 did really well, I was like I said, I was fortunate enough to work on it, was bringing you into that world and telling the stories, right? That's why we care about this sport, who these people are, their background, what they're fighting for, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Why do you fight? And so being able to tell those stories is what makes it interesting. And obviously Teofimo's story, to try to circle it back to what we were talking about earlier, Teofimo's story is just inherently interesting for everything he's gone through, and also obviously what he can do in the ring.
Absolutely. Teofimo Lopez, his options are open, and they're calling him out. So they're making him continually to be relevant, even after a loss. And we talked about fighters marketing themselves. Can you imagine, to get off to topic, of Hector Macho Camacho had social media in his prime? I mean, he did it without social media. So shout out to Macho Camacho and his son Junior, who's watching the show.
And how many fighters, right? What about Muhammad Ali if he was on Twitter, right? I mean, could you imagine the SPAC talk there?
Absolutely.
Or Sugar Ray Leonard, or whoever it would be, right? So many great fighters in the day, but this is the era of social media, and it's about marketing yourself. We brought up, I was talking about Amir Khan earlier. I think that's another fighter who, just in terms of the blueprint of how to market yourself, right? Not necessarily what you would want to do in the ring at all times, but in terms of making yourself an attraction, building a following, and getting yourself those opportunities. He was able to do that because of the marketing aspect and engaging with fans on social media and other places. So I think that right now in 2022 is very important. We see fighters like Ryan Garcia and others taking advantage of that, and I think they should.
Well, and also look at Rolly. I mean, the first fight that was postponed, honestly, I didn't care about it. The second coming around, I mean, he promoted that fight. It was all Rolly. Ticket sales was all Rolly going into that fight. And he started to believe, like, hey, is he really going to pull this off? And he fought one hell of a fight until he got countered off the ropes.
Yeah, I went to the press conference in Brooklyn. I got to interview Rolly, spend some time with him, also on Fight Week and at the fight as well. I mean, he had that self-confidence. To your point, you almost believed it at a certain point. That is one question during that Fight Week, Tank versus Rolly. I asked a lot of folks. I said, does he actually believe this, or is this what he needs to tell himself to have a shot against Tank? And if you look at his comments now, Rolly's comments now, as he looks back on the fight, he feels like he won every round. He feels like he got caught with a punch that happens in boxing. I actually think Tank was doing what he wanted in there. I think all of the pre-fight stuff that you talked about, marketing, all the smack talk, I thought he was actually a fun personality. I really enjoyed interviewing him and spending time with him. And in the ring, the one thing he did really well is he made it uncomfortable for Tank, right? He didn't let Tank get started the way he necessarily would want to. But to Tank's credit, if you watch during the fight, Tank stayed loose. he says that he likes to kind of look around in the crowd. He talks to people because that's what he does in the gym, right? That actually being less hyper focused helps Tank. And Tank was just waiting for his moment, and obviously he found it. So I actually think Tank was mostly in control in that fight, but I do give Rolly credit for making it awkward and making it difficult, and that's what you need to do when you're the underdog.
You know, Tank is as underrated as far as being a very smart fighter in there. He set lots of traps, and that goes with maturity. The old Tank would have went crazy and tried to get him out of there because of all the smack talking. He sat back and he said, hey, we have 12 rounds. Your chin is going to be there somewhere in the fight, and I know what I possess in both hands.
It's probably very difficult to do as a professional prize fighter when your opponent is talking that much smack and you're restraining yourself and saying, hold on, all right, let me just work my game plan, be patient, and look for the opening, which I know will be there. Tank did that. And I actually, I know we're going to talk about Canelo and Triple G soon. I spent some time with Canelo. I got to interview him on Monday here in New York at the press conference. And Canelo, when he was asked his favorite fighter, he said Tank Davis.
Yes.
He's been asked that a few times in the past, and that's his favorite fighter. So obviously Tank is doing something right in terms of his patience in the ring and then that explosion in that moment. And Tank has turned himself, we were talking about attractions earlier. Tank Davis is absolutely an attraction. He's the person that fights, and then your friends who aren't even boxing fans tune in, and they're just general sports fans, and they want to see Tank fight. And he's obviously earned that by the special performances he's put on in the ring.
Boxing is hot right now. I mean, there's mega stars in every weight class. No longer just three that stand out. I mean, in every weight class, we have a star, potential top 10 pound for pound champion of the world. I want to go back again. Okay. If you had Arnold Barboza, let's go back to the 140-pound division, and we got the Jose Ramirez, we got Teofimo Lopez, Regis Prograis, Jose Zepeda. Who would we match up? Who would you match up? First of all, who would be awarded the rematch with Josh Taylor? Would you go Jose Ramirez or Regis?
You know, I really would like to see the Ramirez. I mean, I think it's like, you know, I remember a few years ago with the heavyweight division, we had like the three-headed monster, and it turned into the four-headed monster.
Yes.
And it was like Wilder, Fury, Ruiz, and Joshua. That was at the time where Ruiz first beat Joshua, and it kind of became that four-headed monster. And
Yes.
we were like, take your pick, like anyone, A fights B, C, you know, and then the winners fight. So I think in 140, I mean, I think you have a similar situation. I don't see any of those matchups being something I wouldn't want to see. You know, obviously the Ramirez rematch is definitely really, so, you know, I think there's just so many names at 140 that you know, I would be excited about seeing any of them, but I'll ask you, I know you're obviously interested in the 140-pound division. What would be kind of your top list of matches that you want to see?
Anything involving Regis Prograis.
Yes.
Exciting fighter, marketing himself. Yes. He is who he says he is. He's a workaholic. And all, I mean, there's so many great fights. You got Arnold Barboza, blue collar. He's just waiting for the opportunity. And Zepeda, where did this power come from? I mean, he's been waiting for that rematch, that close fight with Jose Ramirez. And you know, there's a lot of dogs in this division.
No, 100%. And obviously Prograis, waiting for his opportunity, and hopefully he gets that. I think, you know, obviously he's earned that. Definitely an exciting fighter. Definitely, you know, I've always enjoyed interviewing him, you know, talking to him about boxing and everything else he has going on in life. So hoping to see him in there soon against top opposition. Definitely.
There you go. Before we move on, I will say I do favor, if there was a tournament, I do favor the champion right now. And that's not going to go well in my area where I live, but I'm going to call it the way I see it, and I favor Josh Taylor. One thing I want to clarify, do we have that picture of Jose and Conor Ben? Jose Ramirez? Let's put that up there. Okay, I posted this today. I said, facts or rumors? I get a text from the man himself and says, that's false information. I said, okay, that's why I posted it. Facts or rumors? So it looks like that fight is not going to take place. They're not talking about it unless, you know, I've been had on that one, but I did post it, and I wanted to know because there was another, it was on Twitter, and someone posted it, and it said, there's rumors that this is going to happen. So I got a text from the man himself the minute I put it up. So as of today, it's just rumors. It's false information. I don't see a Jose Ramirez and a Conor Ben fight anytime soon. So you can remove that.
Yeah, I mean, that's good reporting there by you. I mean, I feel like Conor Benn has just been on an absolute tear.
Absolutely.
Just taking people out. So I think whoever you match him up with is we talked about being an attraction. That's definitely he definitely fits that.
He's a dangerous fight for anybody at the 140-pound division. There's no cakewalks anymore.
And 147, where I believe
absolutely,
his recent fights are. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? I wasn't going to talk about that, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about Bud Crawford and Spence. I know people get tired of talking about it, but going into the fight, I was going to root for Spence, honestly, because I think Bud Crawford can beat Spence at 147. I think Spence could beat Crawford at 154. But what's good for boxing is I like what Bud Crawford is doing. He says, when I beat Spence, I want to fight one of the Charlo brothers at 154. I'd like to see that happen. Just for him to say it is great for boxing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, this is what we all want. We don't want fights to over-marinate. We want the best fighting the best. One of the biggest fights in boxing, if not the biggest, Spence versus Crawford. We've been wanting it for years. It's still in a good place where in terms of the fighters are still in their prime. This won't be past its expiration date if and when it happens, hopefully soon. They're both, there's nothing not to like there. I mean, they have it all, right? Both undefeated, both young, both charismatic. Crawford was with Top Rank and, the other side of the street in terms of where Spence was under the PBC umbrella. But now it seems like that fight is coming together, and I think we're all very, very excited about it. It's so hard to make a pick on that fight. Both fighters can do so much. And I think Spence has shown this in recent years that, if you thought, okay, this kid is just a guy who can knock people out, he's shown the boxing skill many, many times over. And then Crawford, if you say, oh, this is just a technical boxer, he's shown the finishing skill. And he's really, when he has someone hurt, he usually knocks them out. So it's just a fascinating fight. I mean, I would say some of the biggest fights in boxing, we put Spence Crawford there, Canelo Triple G3, and then Usyk Joshua, the rematch, the winner fighting Tyson Fury. If Tyson Fury does come out of retirement, Bob Arum and other folks at Top Rank who I spoke to said that was most likely going to be a possibility. So I think those are obviously, some of the biggest fights and the biggest mainstream appeal fights that we have in boxing. There's more, but I think those are some of the ones on the short list.
Let's talk about that. How much of a difference do you think with the amount of time that Robert Garcia has to work with Anthony Joshua? Is it going to be a big difference, or is it just something mentally? Because Anthony Joshua does need mentally some help, because once you get stopped, you get kind of just like getting hit by that fastball. I mean, you don't want to take another fastball inside the chin or on top of the head anymore. Anthony Joshua has all the goods to be great. It's just convincing himself at times.
There's definitely a large mental component there for Joshua. I think in that first fight with Ruiz, right? He went toe to toe with Ruiz, and then he went into this solitude, the fortress of solitude, right? And we saw him come out for the Ruiz rematch. He didn't even have a haircut because he was so focused on training, and you could tell he was fighting a very smart technical fight, and obviously he got the win. Ruiz didn't help his own case by moving up in weight, not taking it seriously. I mean, he became heavyweight champion of the world, so obviously the partying and all the obligations started there. But now, and I don't think that's going to be an issue for Usyk. I think Usyk is obviously, a hard worker, and I think we're going to see him at his best in that rematch. But I think it's interesting for Joshua. It's absolutely fascinating for a couple of reasons. In that first fight with Ruiz, Joshua went for the knockout, and then we as observers said, hey, why don't you try using your reach and your size in the rematch? And he did that. He fought, he was moving around a lot. He worked his jab in the rematch versus Ruiz. Versus Usyk, it's almost like the opposite, right? It seems like he tried to box a superior boxer. And that fight was such an intriguing fight. The ref didn't even break them up at one point until the 9th round, I believe it was. The ref didn't step in one time, if I remember correctly. And it was just a fascinating boxing match, but Joshua got outboxed. And now it's almost the opposite. We're saying, hey, we need you to be that power guy and use your size against Usyk, because we know Usyk was the cruiserweight champion coming up to heavyweight. So maybe you can use your size advantage and actually use your power. So we're asking almost the opposite for him. And to answer your question, I do think it is enough time, because Joshua came out recently and said his issue was in the corner, during the first Usyk fight. He says he thought he was winning the fight, and he felt like his corner wasn't telling him he was losing. And because of that, he kept the pace that he was going at and eventually lost the decision. Obviously, Usyk came on late and did well in that final round. But I think, so if Robert Garcia is going to be straight up, and we know him as a very straight up guy, and he's going to tell the truth, if Joshua's losing, that's what he needs to hear, and Robert Garcia will do that. So that's going to be helpful for Joshua. That's what he's asked for, and I believe Robert Garcia can deliver on that.
I agree with you on that. And, you know, trying to outbox a boxer is like somebody trying to outbox Pernell Whitaker. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it's not. He made it so easy for him. I mean, wasn't even feeling threatened. He's like, really, you want to dance with me? I'm a superior dancer. You know, you should have cut the ring off, impose his will, etc. And I believe that's what we're going to see in the rematch. I think we're going to see a hell of a fight, to be honest with you. We may see a few knockdowns.
I mean, we hope so. We hope these, you know, we've had fights this year really live up to the expectations. I was at Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano in Madison Square Garden. It was one of the most amazing atmospheres I've ever been to. And I think the fight over-delivered on the hype.
Oh, absolutely.
We've seen other great fights in the year of 2022. It's a good boxing year. So, hey, why not? Let's do it again in the heavyweight division.
Absolutely. We're talking about women's boxing. I want to throw Jessica McCaskill's name in that mix, because since she's won the world title, she's become, a lot of people say 25% better, 50% better. She is a new fighter. She has that burning desire. Rick Ramos, they're working, as you know, close together, and it's working. If it's not broken, don't fix it. There's a fire lit, and hey, man, she's making her presence known in that division.
Yeah, you know, she's the undisputed champion at welterweight. She's got it all, right? She definitely has it all. I was fortunate enough to interview her it was in the beginning of the pandemic, and it was before the first Cecilia Breikhaus fight.
Okay.
And it was just like you know, it was almost like Breikhaus was this undefeated champion, 36-0, the first lady of boxing. She had it all.
Yes.
And McCaskill was this, you know, scrappy upstart. Obviously, she had been in boxing, but in terms of getting those, you know, those huge opportunities, and she also had to work another job. She had to train in the mornings or after work. You know, there was a lot there, and as that underdog role, she was able to come out on top, and then she was able to do it again in the rematch and close that chapter. And she's obviously had success after that, showcasing her power, getting a couple stoppages. So I think, you know, sky's the limit for her. I think she's going to be, you know, around for a while and doing what she wants to do in there. And it doesn't seem like there's, you know, too many people that can challenge her, but that's what we want to see. That's why they do the fight. So it'd be great to see her against some top name opposition and see what she can do. But definitely a, you know, really scrappy fighter and a great champion.
Hey, Team McCaskill, they're keeping their foot on the pedal, and they're not putting it on the brake at all. I want your take, man. I mean, you're reporting, and you're going to bring it back here on the Fighter's Voice. Canelo and Triple G, you had the opportunity to interview both of them. What was the energy like? And what was I want to ask you, what was the demeanor with Triple G? How did he kind of take those? He's never been really insulted, but he's never been really put in check or called upon, or, hey, I'm going to call you on what you're saying. And Canelo, he'll call a spade, an eye. And he's been doing it lately, and people are soon to forget about, you know, the loss that he took at a light heavyweight division, because he dared himself to be great. And now he has a man possessed in front of him. I don't think we've seen the rest of Triple G. Is what I'm saying. I don't think he's washed up. I think he has one left, and we're going to see it come this third fight. I don't know how much he has left. That's the question. What energy did you pick up, Curran?
Yeah, it was a really fascinating press conference here in New York. I got to interview both men, which was great to get exclusive time with them one-on-one and really kind of sense what's going on there. I think to your point, I mean, it's their fighters seem to have that one great fight left in them. Vladimir Klitschko against Joshua. Now we know Klitschko didn't win that fight, but that was an excellent performance. Nonito Donaire, the first fight against Inoue. There's always fighters have that one great performance. Morales, when he fought Maidana, again, it wasn't like he won the fight, but it was just a great performance to be in there. And there's no reason to think Triple G can't also have a great performance. His whole career, in a way, or at least the recent part of his career, probably has been defined by trying to get this trilogy fight, right? Because the only blemishes on his resume are the loss and the draw to Canelo. And obviously in his mind, And I spoke to him, and he said this too, that he feels obviously like he won those fights. So this is an opportunity for him to right those wrongs. But we know he is 40 years old. And also, just as much on the line is Canelo. He's coming off of a loss. He hadn't lost for nearly a decade, and that was to Mayweather. So this is a huge moment for him too, and it is clearly personal, and that's something I could tell you from speaking with him. And I asked him, that's the first thing I asked him, and he agreed. He acknowledged it, that he said this is personal. He doesn't like the way that he feels Triple G is speaking in these press conferences, but the other things he's saying, he feels like he should be more straight up. And then for Triple G, I asked him if it's personal for him. He says it's not. He said we shook hands after fight 2, and if you know Triple G, he's always the gentleman. I've got to follow his career for a long time. That's always how he's been, the gentleman outside the ring, juxtaposed with this destroyer in the ring, and that's who he is. And so I didn't expect anything different from Triple G. I don't expect him to necessarily make it personal. I've seen a few things here and there. And obviously for both men, I mean, this is a must-win fight for their career and their legacy. And I guess you could argue that maybe it's more of a must-win for Canelo since he's younger and since he, was the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the sport, and there's probably a lot left there for him. It depends how much is left there for Triple G. But I do agree with you. I do think even at 40 years old, I do think there's a lot left there for Gennady Golovkin, and I'm very, very, very excited for September 17th for the trilogy fight.
So am I, and I would love to get Abel's take on that. They should have him commentate that fight. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's obviously another interesting storyline. I did interview Jonathan Banks, who's now training Triple G. The one thing I asked, or the two things I asked Jonathan Banks was, your fighter is 40 years old and he's also moving up in weight. Are these challenges? He doesn't feel like they are. Jonathan Banks doesn't feel like they are. He's not concerned about the weight. I believe Triple G fought Steve Rolls at 163 pounds, so he's dabbled above the 160-pound middleweight limit before. And then the age, I mean, he's also got 24 rounds of experience with this fighter. They were 35 the first time they fought in 2017. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, there was some time off there because of the pandemic and other things for Triple G. So maybe you could say he still has a little bit of fresher legs. I mean, we're going to find out on September 17th, and that's what makes it so intriguing.
It is, and as we get closer to that, I'm going to get you back on, and I want your take, because you're going to have to pick a winner. You're not going to dodge this one. I know I'm rooting for, but man, it's hard to. Wow, I can't even think of it just yet. I mean, because how do you root against Canelo? Doing what all the attributes that he has, and he knows he wants to make a statement, not only because it's Triple G, he gets to do it because he wants to come back after a loss, and it's against a man that he wants to put down and completely wipe him out. I mean, he means it when he says, I want to send him into retirement.
That's one of the things I asked him. I said, why is it so important for you to retire this man? And he said, this is the trilogy. I want a definitive finish, and it's time for him to be out of boxing. Those were Canelo's words. You can see the interview on my social media pages, and
great job, by the way.
I think that I hear what you're saying. I'm not going to be rooting for one fighter either way. I'm going to follow both of them, and I'm rooting for a good fight.
There you go.
But what excites me about it is just the fact that they are just so motivated for this opportunity, right? This isn't the fight before the fight. This is the fight, and so I'm definitely very excited for that.
Exactly. I mean, it's like a bullpen pitcher. You can't get warmed up. You're already throwing strikes as soon as the fight already started. The bell already rang. It's on. Now,
yeah, the energy. I was just thinking about this out loud as you were talking. Was somewhat. It's kind of reminding me of the energy of Pacquiao versus Marquez the fourth time, and because it was just ready to explode, and there was such a history there, and the dislike that kind of happened through those fights. And obviously that fourth fight absolutely delivered with the trading of the knockdowns, and obviously Pacquiao fought a great fight, didn't come out on top, and that's okay. That happens when you dare to be great. So I just think that fight over delivered, and I do feel like we'll get something like that. I can't imagine it not being an exciting fight.
It has to be, because I mean, it is what it is, and I'm glad that we get to see it a third time. Now let's talk about Jake Paul. We're talking about somebody who people pointed the finger at him and said, look, this guy's a YouTuber. They're no longer attaching that name to him. Of course they do, because there's where he started, but he's putting the work in. I mean, call it what you will. The man, he's in a weight class where he can honestly make a difference. I want to see him with an experienced fighter. I want to see that Fury fight take place. But if it doesn't, there's somebody from the Sacramento area who was recently contacted, and he said, Richard, help me in any shape or form make this fight happen. And that's Blake McKernan, the Beast. Either way, I want to see Tyson Fury come August back in the ring. I'm sorry, not Tyson. I'm sorry. I'm thinking Tyson Fury. My gosh. My man, Jake Paul.
You mean Tommy Fury,
yes,
right?
Yes, Tommy Fury.
And you want to see Jake Paul. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I personally have said for a long time that people from other walks of life going into boxing is a good thing, and that includes YouTubers. I think that's great for adding new eyeballs to the sports. If you look at the numbers of fighters, professional boxers, let's say, that came from a traditional path, that are on the undercard of these fighters, their followings go up. And that is, you can see that if you look at the numbers. So there's nothing wrong about that. If you also look at what Jake Paul's done for women's boxing, for fighters' pay, he elevated Amanda Serrano to getting to that place, to that main event at Madison Square Garden in the big room versus Katie Taylor, and really made that event happen, of course, with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and all the great work that they do as well. So I've always said that I think, these people from other walks of life is definitely a good thing for boxing. That's my opinion. Now, right now, I almost feel bad for Jake, because the one knock on Jake Paul for a long time was, when are you going to fight a real boxer?
Exactly.
And, we know he was fighting. He fought Nate Robinson, who was an NBA player, didn't seem to have much experience at all in boxing. Then he fought some, older folks that were, good fighters in the UFC, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley. He was able to knock these folks out. But the question kept being, when are you going to fight a real, a traditional real boxer? And he was doing that in Tommy Fury. Not only was Tommy Fury a professional boxer in that traditional sense, he was also the same size as Jake Paul and the same age. So all those attributes and advantages that were there in previous fights weren't going to be there. And to Jake Paul's credit, he was ready to take on that fight and take on that undefeated fighter. Now we're not sure exactly what's happening. They're supposed to have the press conference here in New York. Earlier this week, it seemed like Tommy Fury wasn't able to get on the airplane to come down. We don't know what exactly is going on there. It could be gamesmanship. So like I said, I actually feel for Jake Paul a little bit, because he's trying to do the thing that everyone's saying, hey, you weren't doing this. He's trying to do it, and it doesn't seem to be coming together. We'll see what happens to that fight. In terms of backup opponents, I still think Julio Cesar Chavez would be a fascinating opponent.
There you go. I was about to say that. Yes, great pick.
Yeah, that would be a fighter that's, can match Jake Paul in size, still, in his 30s. He's a professional boxer, and he's got a lot of experience. Another name was Anderson Silva. And Anderson Silva, I think, would be a very dangerous fight for Jake Paul. But I think Jake would fall back into that possible criticism, assuming that he could get past Anderson, which is a huge assumption, especially if you look at how great Anderson Silva's been even recently. But let's just say, hypothetically, just for the sake of conversation, he was able to get past Silva. That then the comments would be, hey, you fought a 47-year-old who wasn't a professional boxer. So, like I said, I feel for Paul in this situation, and we'll see what happens. But Richie, let me ask you, what is your take on fighters and folks coming from, other walks of life into boxing?
I like it. Hey, we're the land of opportunity, and why not? We're the land of opportunity. Yes, they didn't put their road work in. Yes, they didn't start in the amateur ranks. But if you got the man with guts, and he has decent talent to get in there, and most of all, the balls to get in there and not get hurt, why not? If it's going to be one-sided, of course, he's not going to go against Tyson Fury. So there's that risk there. But if he's putting in the work and he's training, he is a gym rat, and I think I'm all for it. Especially, like you said, he does want to take on a professional fighter. He does want to silence the critics. And you know what, Curran? He has nothing to lose. If he loses, he'll just say, hey, you lost to a professional fighter.
Yeah, it's funny. I was seeing a piece, I believe produced by Sebastian at The Zone. Shout out to Sebastian. And they asked Jake Paul about a lot of these mythical matchups. And when it was like someone that, you expect Jake Paul to beat, Jake Paul's answer of how he would win was, I'll knock him out in the first round. When they asked about Canelo, I believe Jake Paul's answer was, it'll probably be a split decision. And then they asked him about Tyson Fury, and his answer again was, it'll probably be split decision, right? Those would obviously, be totally different types of tests than the fights that we've seen him in the past. Now, at the same time, this is just a fighter with a few fights. And usually a fighter with a few fights is not even facing, even known competition necessarily, depending on who you are and when you turn professional. Obviously there's been exceptions, for example, like when Lomachenko became a professional and many others. But so it depends where you are in your career, but it is interesting in that way.
Hey, man, the promoters in the market, they love numbers. It's all about numbers. Look at it. He got to deal with Showtime boxing. I mean, there's guys that go their whole career and never, ever even fight on Showbox. So he's defied the odds. He is doing something right. He is promoting himself. And he's decent in the ring. I say decent. That's no knock on him. We're talking about somebody who didn't have the amateur pedigree, didn't go through the rankings, been calling out guys, and, sky's the limit. Because when it's all said and done, I mean, he can be one hell of a promoter if he invests in his career right. And financially, he'll have the support. Because look what he wants to do for other fighters that didn't get the opportunity. So his heart's in the right place.
Yeah, you mentioned Showtime giving him the deal, and I think that was a great job by Showtime. I was fortunate enough to interview Steven Espinoza, and I asked him, I said, what was it like internally when you brought up Jake Paul? And, he said, obviously there was some pushback, but then once they realized that, what this could bring, new eyeballs and things like that. And the biggest thing Steven Espinoza said during that interview, he said, we're going to do this if Jake Paul is going to take fighting seriously and fight, well-known opponents and things like that. And obviously he's doing that. So he's, he gets credit for some of the things that we talked about, like you said, putting a spotlight on fighter pay, and I think also making it entertaining. He does these bets. For example, we were discussing Tyson Fury earlier. He did a $1 million bet with Tyson Fury. Jake's side, mentions that they, allegedly sent out a contract with the money in escrow ready to go. So he's, it seems like he's putting his money where his mouth is. He was good there. Him and Eddie Hearn mutually were going to do a big $1 million bet on Taylor versus Ronda. They weren't able to do it for legal reasons, I believe is what they said. But I think they're doing something with charity now. So, it makes it interesting. It makes it fun.
Hey, one more that I'm going to try. Let's pull up that, McKernan. Yeah, Blake the Beast McKernan. Oh, we don't? I thought I sent that to you. Well, anyways, for my dude, Blake the Beast McKernan from Sacramento. He got a text. They offered him the fight, but they're trying to work out some details. But then I'm sure he's one of many that got that text. Let's just keep it real. That's the boxing world. And also a shout out to Boxing Vitals. He said, "What's up, Curran and Richard? Thank you guys." And then we got Bruce, Gas Boxing, Jazz, and more. Salute, family. So hey, man, they know who you are, Curran. I mean, you're a household name when it comes to the sport of boxing. Now I'm gonna flip it a little bit. How does that make you feel? I mean, because right now you're in the peak, in the prime of your career, and you're doing what you love. You do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life.
Well, I'm sure you have the same situation. You're covering the sport. You're putting in your hours. You're putting in your time, and I salute you for that. And obviously, you've built a platform here and an audience. And thank you to everyone who commented there. I appreciate the kind words. And to answer your question, I mean, obviously, blessed to work in this. For me, my journey was, I spent nearly a decade at HBO behind the camera as a producer director, working on shows like 24/7 and live boxing. And then more recently in the last 4 or 5 years, being able to be in front of the camera. And it's been an amazing journey, being able to be on NBC Sports. And last year also being on air on ESPN, The Zone, and Fox Sports. So it's been an amazing journey, just getting started. The thing that, it's what we talked about earlier. I mean, the thing that intrigues me about boxing, obviously I love watching. It's my favorite sport. But when it really intrigues me about it is the stories. And those are present in all sports. Those are present in things outside of sports. And that's what I'm always into, the storytelling aspect of who people are, where they came from, why they're doing the thing they're doing. And that's why I've actually done work outside of boxing and golf. I've done sit-down interviews with CEOs and leaders. I really find immigrant stories very appealing. Those are really interesting to me, because I just think it's fascinating, and the sacrifices that people make to come here with not a lot and work really hard and achieve those dreams. So that's what I look to uncover, is sitting with these folks and finding out why they are the way they are, what motivates them, and shining a light on their stories, on their story. There's so many great stories out there, and I feel like those deserve to be told.
You got to fly down from New York, come to Fresno, California. You got to do a piece. We'll tag team it on Jose Ramirez and also Tulari's Richard Torres Jr., who's going to fight his second professional fight for ESPN next month.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd love to. I'd love to. Like I said, those, I really like meeting fighters early on in their career and getting the sense to know who they are, and telling their background and their story. I'd love to do that for sure. 100%.
Now let's talk about one that is walking away, and I would say at the right time. I mean, the man has everything that he needs. 4 division world champion, took a huge fight right before the pandemic hit, so he was doing great financially whenever a lot of people were on the shelf. And that's I want to give tribute to Mikey Garcia.
Yeah, yeah, great. Great fighter in his day. Technically very sound boxer. One thing that was interesting about Mikey, his brother Robert said that because when they had the gym, let's say maybe it was like 5 to 10 years ago, they had a lot of fighters there like Margarito and Brandon Rios, and these guys were guys who punched with power, especially like a Brandon Rios.
Yes.
And Robert Garcia said Mikey actually hits harder than these bigger guys because he is so accurate, right? His accuracy is right there. And that was a testament to just how technically sound he was as a fighter. And I think, probably we'd have to ask him personally for his reasons for leaving the sport. But, he's 34 years old. He's got, he's got his, as we say, his faculties about him. He can go live a great life, do something else with his life, spend time with his family. So you can never really knock anyone for hanging up the gloves. Definitely always better to hang up the gloves too early than too late. And, I would be curious to one day speak to Mikey Garcia about the one thing that was like a little bit of a roadblock in his career was the almost 2 years, or over 2 years, I should say, from 2014 to 2016, where he had to be out of the ring, right, due to promoter issues, and things like that. So you wonder if he would have managed that differently, knowing that was, the essential prime of his career. So I'd be interested in that. And then, of course, he gets so much credit for, or at least I give him credit for daring to be great and moving up 2 weight classes to challenge Errol Spence, one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the game. I know, obviously, Mikey Garcia lost all scorecards, and some rounds were 10-8 rounds, and that was deservedly so. He did get outclassed that night, but I think as long as you dared to be great the way he did, I give props to that.
Exactly. And you know what? The guy has a car collection like no other. Financially, he's stable. He has his own promotions, CBD line. He invested well. He's living life, and he's very, very happy. Trust me.
Well, no, you would know, and that's great that he is. And like I said, I mean, I think we wish him all the best. I think, selfishly as fans, I'm sure you feel this way too.
Yes.
We would like to see him fight more because of how great he was in there. And obviously he came up short in his final fight, and that's okay. That happens. But we saw him, have a lot of success in the ring against different fighters and have some highlight reel knockouts along the way. So, selfishly, we would have liked to see him continue. But, we salute him, his great career, wish him all the best in whatever he likes to do in his next act. It sounds like from your reporting there that he's going to be, an entrepreneur and doing all these different ventures. So best of luck to him. And, it was a great career, and it was, a great career while it lasted, and all the best to him.
Exactly. And not making any excuses, but sometimes in taking a loss, you're still caught up in the fights that never happened. I mean, there was contracts on the table with Manny Pacquiao getting ready to happen. I mean, it was close. They were going to announce it once. They were going to announce it twice. And you mentioned greedy. I am greedy because I wanted to see him and Mr. Regis Prograis share the ring. I mean, that would have been one heck of a fight. They talked about it. Regis actually texted me after Mikey lost, and he said, "Excuse my French." He said, "Man, Mikey's fucking with my money." But that's Regis. He's a straight shooter. He'll tell you exactly how he feels.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's, it's interesting you brought up Manny Pacquiao. It seems like there was a lot of people at certain points in their career in the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes. Amir Khan at one point had the fight signed, and then it fell apart.
Yes.
You mentioned Mikey Garcia, Ryan Garcia, right? There was a rumor there where it was pretty close that he was going to fight Pacquiao. So these, and then Errol Spence, that fight was going to happen, and then we know what happened with that. And Ugas stepped in. So there's a lot of what ifs there, not just for Mikey Garcia, but also for Manny Pacquiao. And I mean, I think that's, as boxing fans, it's maddening. Sometimes we don't get the fights we want to see. But I think it seems like more and more, due to public pressure and fandom and people coming in and demanding these fights, we're starting to get more of these fights. These are working across the street fights, and especially some of these fights that we talked about today. I mean, they're the top fighters in the sport, and they're absolutely fascinating. And Spence Crawford, Canelo, Triple G3. We talked about Usyk Joshua too, and then maybe the winner fighting a Tyson Fury. So, I mean, those are all tremendous fights. So at least as fight fans, we're getting some of these great matchups that we really want.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned fight fan, because this is what I want you to do, Curran. Take the reporter hat off. Put it aside. Pretend you're having a cold beer. You get to play matchmaker. Any division, any two fighters, put together a fight card, a dream fight card, or just a dream fight card for you. Who do you want to see share the ring? Forget about PBC, Top Rank, Golden Boy. We're just going to merge them and make it all work.
Yeah, I'm going to just try to think off the top of my head, because there's so many different matchups that I would like to see. So I'm just going to throw a couple things out at you, and I'll tell you why. I still would really, I don't know if this will ever happen. It doesn't seem like it will, but because of the anticipation that was once there, I still would really like to see Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. It was so close. It felt like to happening, obviously, as was Joshua and Fury. I mean, that was signed for a 2-fight deal. That would also be really interesting. So I would really, really like to see that fight. Canelo Alvarez is taking on Triple G. That's fascinating. I don't know what's going to happen in that fight, but assuming Canelo Alvarez is able to get past that, I really would like to see him take on David Benavidez. I think Benavidez looked phenomenal in his last fight. And obviously, he's a big guy, he's a come forward guy. And I think that would be such an interesting fight versus the power counterpuncher that Canelo is. So I would definitely be excited for that. We have to mention Charlo versus Andrade. Of course, that's a very important fight. That would be another really interesting one. We mentioned Spence Crawford is hopefully happening. So let's hope that happens. I actually think something like Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis or versus a Devin Haney could be really interesting. And I hope to see that one day. And so there's so many different fighters and combinations out there. It seems like as a boxing fan, we're getting more of them now than we used to, and that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing for the sport. And so you put me on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot. Your dream fight card. What is it?
Well, I want to see Regis Prograis and Jose Ramirez. I want to see that fight.
Yes.
And possibly, after I get off this one, Teofimo Lopez and Arnold Barboza. Definitely want to see Ryan Garcia, not against Tank Davis. I just think he's biting off a little more than he can chew. I'd like to see him against Devin Haney. I think that'd be a great matchup. That'd be a safe matchup for him. And we'll see how that goes. It'll be kind of a chess match. That's what I anticipate. And in the heavyweight division, I want to see Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz. I think that's a great matchup. Both right hands. If he can, avoid that big right hand, I want to see what happens in the second half of the fight. Andy Ruiz is still in there, but he can be his worst enemy. I mean, now he's inactive. I mean, he got the fight now with Ortiz, and Ortiz is hungry after being stopped twice for his opportunity. I mean, when he got two opportunities to fight for the heavyweight title. But yet, that can still be a great fight. Ortiz and Andrew Ruiz, that's going to be happening. But Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, I do want to see that fight, and that can possibly take place because Deontay Wilder's still knocking on the door. I mean, he has that one hitter quitter.
Yeah, no, it definitely could. I mean, if you look at Andy Ruiz, the latest videos of him coming out and training, it looked like he was in really good shape, and we've seen him, get in shape and train hard. We saw him against Chris Arreola, and he's able to get the win there. I think it'll be an interesting fight versus Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz coming off the knockout win against Charles Martin to start off the year, but he did get dropped twice, and obviously he's older in age. But that's
and he really doesn't tell his age. He doesn't tell his age. We're not really correct on what his age is, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's listed as what it is. We'll take it as that, and
yes.
So that'll be an interesting fight. And then to your point, I mean, if Ruiz gets past Luis Ortiz and Wilder wants to come back, you figure, Wilder's not going to take on Tyson Fury again. It seems like that, trilogy, that chapter is probably closed.
Yes.
And you figure most likely the Tyson Fury is going to take on the winner of Usyk versus Joshua too. And so that, leaves Andy Ruiz and Wilder. I mean, I think, that's a perfect matchup. for us to see as fight fans. It could be a really, really exciting fight, especially to your point, if Andy Ruiz is training hard, and it seems like he is, and he's obviously motivated, and obviously Wilder would be motivated to come back from the situation that happened to him with Tyson Fury and taking that loss. So yeah, that would be a fascinating fight as well.
Exactly. Now remember, the reporting stuff is off to the side. You're in tip-top shape. You're a great athlete, man. You're going to fight for a world title. Curran, who's in your corner? Who's training you? What's your walkout song? And who's your opponent? Remember, you're in your prime. You deserve to be there. It's a pay-per-view fight.
Okay. All right. Let me think about this. So, okay, first of all, the walkout music is going to be easy for me. I'm a big Drake fan, so I actually liked I liked Honestly Nevermind, so that the new album. So that it's going to be some kind of Drake song for the walkout. If he can rap while I'm walking out, that's even better. You mentioned trainer. I mean, that's a really interesting question.
Then put together your team. Put together your team of three.
I was gonna say the first name that came to mind, and he's if we can do mythical as well, people who have passed. I spent some time at HBO. I got to work alongside Emmanuel Stewart, and he just could see everything and in the boxing ring, and he saw things that no one else saw. And obviously we've seen what he's done to help fighters in their career and turn things around. And so I think if we're talking mythical and I could bring someone in, I think that would be it. In terms of an opponent, there's no opponent. Okay. I like watching the sport. I like interviewing for the sport. One reason why I respect this sport and these fighters so much is because they're literally risking their lives for our entertainment, obviously, and also for money and glory and things like that. But part of it is for our entertainment. I absolutely respect that, especially with all the dangers of being a professional fighter. So there is no opponent that I'm going to be taking on. I'm gonna stick to. I'm gonna take wherever I put down that hat. I'm gonna put that right back on because I will be not stepping in there. But I would, of course, you asked me the question, so now I got to ask you. I'm curious. Your dream team and your dream scenario for your fight.
Well, since you brought out Emmanuel Stewart, Emmanuel Stewart, to me, he's the only trainer in history to train for a knockout. He didn't like going to the scorecards. He wanted knockouts. He trained his fighters for knockouts. I had the opportunity of meeting him, talking with him. And I'll tell you a quick story. It was Manny Pacquiao and Eric Morales. And he's calling me down. He's still working for HBO. He's calling me down. And I come down. He had a flip phone, and he's flipping it over and over and over again. It took him a while, and he goes, "Look, I do have your number." He goes, "See, I have your number. I'll call you, Ortiz." But he would always bring me down. He made it possible for my mom to meet Julio Cesar Chavez when he was training Chavez for the rematch with Frankie Rando. And just a beautiful man, great guy. I would definitely have Emmanuel Stewart and team him up with Robert Garcia and Freddie Roach. And my cut man would be Mike Rodriguez.
That's great. And you brought up Freddie Roach. I was lucky enough to spend some time at the Wild Card. Always been a huge fan of Freddie Roach and his approach. So that would be my trainer, modern day trainer. Definitely Freddie. Love his offensive style. Love, his story and what he's been able to do. And obviously building out the Wild Card and his whole background. So,
and let's talk about Marie. Let's talk about Marie, because Marie, she holds it down.
Yeah, if you want to get something done at the Wild Card, you got to ask Marie. So you told me your trainer, and you did you tell me, you didn't say your walkout song or your opponent?
My walkout song would be what is it? Kryptonite. That song, Kryptonite. Who is it? Who sings that song? Who is it? No, it's not Eminem. No, I don't want that one. Kryptonite. The Kryptonite song.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look that up right there. My producer's gonna look that up for me right now. I should be knowing it right now. Yeah, because that was Richie's song.
Your opponent would be?
Well, I would love to share the ring with Tommy Hearns, but I don't want to get put to sleep. So it'd probably be someone safe that likes to dance around. Maybe I would love, oh, man, that's a tough one. Because I did ask the guys to share the ring with a bit. Maybe Manny Pacquiao.
Now, they may call you out. They may, there's a lot of different types of fighters and different entities in boxing right now. So Manny
Pacquiao. It'd be Manny Pacquiao. It would be Manny Pacquiao. Leading up to that, my sparring partners would be Thomas the Hitman Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Mikey Garcia. And
see, that's smart, calling out a fighter who's retired, because he's retired. So
exactly.
Then he can't come after you.
Exactly. What was that song? Was it 3 Dogs Down?
3 Doors.
Oh, 3 Doors Down. Kryptonite. That's my
Okay.
jam right there.
That's
yes.
your song.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
yes,
Well,
yes.
there you have it. So, maybe it'll happen one day. Fighters come out of retirement all the time. And
We'll
think
play.
Pacquiao's
We'll
available.
play chess or we'll play a video game or something. But no, as far as putting on the leather, it's not going to happen. No way. In no way. I've never had anybody ask me that, and you put me on the spot. So yeah, good job, Curran.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's fun to think about the mythical matchups there. But if you get a call from Pacquiao tomorrow, you know what to do.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. I got a text from Sean and Manny Pacquiao. They made a video for my son, giving a thumbs up for Richie. You got to remember, it was 2:30 in the morning. I get this text just out of the blue, and I can't believe it. I mean, I can't even tell anybody about it because I'm literally in tears, because, I don't know if you know my story. My son's in heaven, and every time I do a thumbs up for Richie, it's for my son. It's not for me. A lot of people think it's me, so they think, oh, Rich is being arrogant, thumbs up for him. No. Richie is my son. People do call me Richie. I'll accept that. But, at the end of every show, I give a thumbs up for Richie. So Manny Pacquiao sends me this video, him and Sean, and giving a thumbs up for Richie. I get it at 2:30 in the morning because, in the Philippines, it's different times there. So, yeah, that's definitely would like to share the ring with Manny Pacquiao. Class act. And I don't think he would hurt me too much.
Well, that's a great story. Definitely a class act.
Thank you.
And props to you and that story. That's definitely this is what I was talking about. The reason why I love speaking to people and hearing their background and their story. And I think that's great what you've done and turn that into that type of sign off, and that you've gotten that from people like Manny Pacquiao. So yeah, I mean, that's a great story there about Pacquiao.
Well, thank you. Curran, thank you for your time. And, tell the viewers, how can we follow you? And when is your podcast air? Because we want to support exactly what Curran Bhatia stands for.
Yeah, thank you. You can listen to my podcast. It's called Ask the Experts with Curran Bhatia. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to your podcast. You can also see that content on my YouTube page, youtube.com/Curran Bhatia. That's Curran Bhatia, CurranBhatia. You can follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, basically everywhere. It's at Curran Bhatia. You'll see me on different outlets. Like I mentioned, NBC Sports, is featured on a bunch of different other outlets as well. But yeah, no, if you're watching this and you want to just talk boxing, you want to talk storytelling, talk producing, talk whatever, hit me up on social media. And, I'm always willing to talk and chat with folks. So yeah, and anyone watching this, if you enjoyed this, I very much appreciate your time and for watching this conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. Iron does sharpen iron. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube, it's www.youtube.com/thefightersvoice. Remember, every fighter has a voice, and so do you. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Curran Bhatia, future Hall of Famer in the sport of boxing. And as always, it's a wrap. Thumbs up for Richie.